Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Robert Smith, President and CEO of Nightclub Security Consultants, a national leader in training and consultation on venue safety practices. While with the San Diego Police Department, Smith responded to situations with venue security assaulting intoxicated patrons and realized specialized training was necessary. In 1998, he formed Nightclub Security Consultants and developed a curriculum based upon his officer training. He has since served as chairperson of California's committee to develop the first state mandatory Proprietary Security Officers training. He has provided online and on-site training to 25,000 security staff from 1,500 venues and advised more than 100 cities and states on best practices on security standard. He is a frequent speaker at Nightclub and Bar Show in Las Vegas and at RHI events. We're fortunate to have Robert Smith with us today. Hey, Robert, it's great that you're here and it's great to see you. And it's been a really long time that we've been kind of collaborating over the years.
Coming on, I think, around 20 years.
Yeah. It's been quite a while. So I know that as we talked, or as I introduced you, you're really one of the premier experts in security and nightlife venues and social venues. And your career has evolved from when we first met. So why don't you just give a brief kind of evolutionary background of how you started and what were some of the milestones over the course of the career
Sure.
that you've had?
So, like many people my age, I had a father that taught me to be self-sufficient, and I tell you that in the beginning because it really helps me explain and people understand the evolution of where I started this. So I was a medic in the Navy for 11 years, and you problem solve every day with there. You got a rash, you got a cold, you got a flu, and the medic person in the Navy, the corpsman, handles everything they can until you get to the point they can't. You send them to a doctor, but they want you to handle it locally, so you solve problems. Then I became a police officer, and it's all about problem solving. And I was lucky enough to be in the San Diego Police Department, and we were one of the first original departments that jumped into problem solving and community policing. And I was right there in our academy learning that, and I did so well, I was teaching it. So then in 98, we had Super Bowl in our city, and I had to arrest a door host or bouncer because he punched a drunk in the face. And in my car, I started thinking about what he had done. And wow, I wonder how many times we respond to calls at bars and clubs that could have been handled differently. What a waste of money. So I was out of service for 4 to 5 hours, arresting, booking, following up with the victim he had punched at the door, and then taking him to jail. And it was 4 to 5 hours of work. And then I started magnifying that. So I went to my sergeant and said, hey, would you mind if I looked at the numbers? And our crime analysis unit came back and said, we're spending about $400,000 a year responding to bar and club fights, incidents. And I said, okay, can you give me a list of those? And I looked at that list, and it was several pages. And I saw many of them that I believe that with training could have been solved by the on-site bouncer or manager. So then I started looking at the training, and there was none. 1998, no state, no city in our country had any sort of training for the generic bar guard, the host, the bouncer, the floor walker. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. I can't believe they're asked to do the same thing cops do every day, but they're giving zero training and not required to have training. So I went to my sergeant, my lieutenant, my captain, and I asked if I could submit this as a beneficial suggestion for the city. Let's train San Diego PD. We would train, we'd hold monthly classes to give them the most basic things. And it went up to the chief's office, and they went to the vice unit. And the vice unit said, no way, that's not our job. We're enforcement. We're not going to train these guerrillas. No way. That's a stupid idea. They won't learn. Okay. A month later, I had my business license. I had my outside employment approved, and I was giving my first class. It was April of 98, late April of 98. And my first class was probably the toughest class because it's the first time you're stepping into it. It was with the Deja Vu strip club chain. They had 6 venues in San Diego County. and the regional manager saw my one-page website at the time. I developed it myself. It was just a title, and this is what we do. And somehow he found me. And the training was a success. We had worked with them the next several years, but through word of mouth in that first month, I had 20 people calling me about training. And I couldn't fulfill all the requests because I was still an active officer working the streets, working the fields, graveyards, day shift. So I just kind of kept it as my free time. But I saw that there was a need across the country for this because no state had anything, no city had anything. And we've grown for 24 years now in April of this year. And we've really established ourselves nationally, including we've got clients that use our online program in the UK and Canada and Spain and Australia and New Zealand, because there is nothing else out there that does what we do, that says what we say, and we teach the way we teach. A couple of significant milestones we've come to cross. One, in 2008, I was asked to be the chairperson for the committee in California. California became the first state to write a law specifically to in-house guards. I had the program already. When I was appointed to be the chairperson on this committee, there was the International Director of Security for Walmart, the J. Paul Getty Museum, Disney, Wells Fargo, all these billion-dollar corporations worldwide, and they saw California as the spear, the tip of the spear of what might come. So they wanted to be involved. But when they got in that room with me and they said, wow, you're dealing with the mom and pop bars and clubs. You already have a program. Let's look at what you're doing. So I put it on the board, and eventually within about 7 months, it became our program in California. 16 hours of mandatory job specific training, a background check, and a fee, a registration fee. And California now has 2 licenses as of 2011. A generic guard, which is guard card, they call it, working for a guard company, and proprietary guard, where you work for some private individual. Jim, you hire me and I have training in this area. That's one great milestone. The second milestone was creating our national program, where now states across the country, cities, bars, and restaurants could look and say, oh, this is a national certification program. And we have certain groups and certain associations behind it to say, oh, we stand by Robert's training as a certification authority. And there's not really much to that. It's fancy words for saying people approve this type of training for bars and clubs. And the most recent milestone, a few years ago, we had an insurance company approach us. And they said, hey, do you work with Bar X in San Diego? Yeah, and who are you? And they said they're their insurance, and they've noticed that in the last 3 years, they've noticed a steady decline in liability, civil liability lawsuit claims. And they said the owners have said the only thing that's changed in that 3 years, they implemented our training, they implemented our policies, and we've helped them with hiring. And it changed the way they do business on a liability standpoint. It decreased calls for police service, which I knew it would. It decreased arrests, it decreased violence, it decreased guest misbehavior, because from the night beginning at the door, the guard is friendly, outgoing, proactive, not letting certain people in and making people leave early. And that's going to solve your problems. Those are 3 great milestones.
Well, that's great. It seems like you've made a lot of progress. I'm really interested in just the more generic trends that you've seen in terms of what people risks have been in venues, and how the training has had to adapt over the years, and to what extent COVID may have altered or changed the role of security in a venue.
Surprisingly enough, right to that last point you make, COVID, other than shutting places down for a year, essentially a year, our clients in Florida, Texas, and some other states opened up fairly rapidly. Other than not being able to do in-person training, we had an online program already up and running 5, maybe 10 years prior to COVID coming out. We were in Seattle when that first broke several years ago at your conference, when the nursing home had 1 death and 5 deaths and 7 deaths. And not once did I ever think about the extent of what COVID would be. However, after about 3 months and we started shutting down, our country started shutting down, we didn't see any decline in our online training. It was steady. People continued to hire once they got reopened, once they started figuring out how to use sidewalks as spaces, once cities started giving permissions and states allowed it, people continued to go out in the states that were allowed to be open. We didn't travel much at all, but our online program continued.
And more specifically, what is it that is the highest risk factor for somebody who works in a security role in a high occupancy venue? What would be the top 3 things that create the greatest risk that you feel venues need to put,
Number 1 is overservice of alcohol. And that's been the same for 24 years. Bartenders and clubs make money from the service of alcohol. And I say bartenders because they make tips, but the clubs make money from service of alcohol. When I started this company, there was no bottle service. Within about 3 years in the early 2000s, bottle service really took over, where you could buy a bottle, sit and drink and pour your own drinks. And that just increased the excessive consumption of alcohol. That's the number 1 factor then and now. Number 2, the 2 things that are evolving are fake IDs, underage drinkers, and actually the decline of drugs being the big issue, prevalent, being used in day-to-day, night-to-night operations of bars, clubs, and restaurants. They're still there, but not like they were in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s to the mid 2000s. Whether they've gone underground very well, or people are not poly drug using with alcohol and drugs as much. But our company has found, our clients are finding less people using and trying to buy on their property. The other big factor was guns. Gun carrying, bar shootings has increased dramatically. Started about 2 years before COVID, 2016, 17, when we started to see an uptick in bar venues nationwide going up. And I'll tell you, that's probably still the big discussion point on how do we deal with gun violence. IDs, there are companies, there are scanners, there's better training to pick out these bad IDs. Alcohol service is still an ongoing issue, but dealing with this new gun issue, and I say new because it's relatively new in the last 5 to 6 years, one of the big factors that I've had to really fight to overcome with owners is having them accept the fact that kids these days, and I say kids between the ages of 18 for all ages clubs to 21, if you think back, they've grown up with lockdown drills. They've grown up with understanding gun violence is there. Many of them have lost family members, or they know someone that was killed in, around, or because of a club, bar, or restaurant. So owners now have to accept the fact their clients know these things are there. No longer, it used to be 8 years ago, if I did a survey, I would ask club goers, bar people in line to go to the bar. They didn't like to see security at the door, patting down, metal detectors. That meant to them this was a dangerous venue. It's a total opposite now, Jim. Mm-hmm. They see that now. Young people 21 to 28 see that now, and they're like, oh, good, this must be a safe place. They're doing things to limit the chance of me getting hurt. And that's where owners in their 40s, 50s, and 60s need to really embrace that and understand it. It's not a bad thing. It's a positive experience now.
So you see technology like ID scanning and metal detectors and body-worn cameras and other types of technology that some maybe 20 years ago would have seen intrusive and invasion of privacy and restriction on freedom. You see this younger generation saying, I'm used to going to school with cameras all around me. I'm used to having a metal detector, I don't mind somebody's checking my age with technology, So, who knows where biometrics are going to go with age ID, but you have this whole evolution of technology. So you see these tools kind of augmenting the security's ability to be better equipped.
And here's the thing, and I agree with you. The AI, the newer systems, the technologies that are there now and coming will absolutely continue to evolve. But Jim, you can get currently right now, you can buy a robot bartender, period. So why do you need a bartender? Well, the customer service, I want that interplay. You're right. Bartending robots are going to be a gimmick for people that have the money to waste. You won't be able to find a robot bouncer or robot door host. That personal interaction at the door from 1930 post-prohibition of looking you in the eye, watching the crowd, hearing the cars drive by, listening to the people walking by, getting that ID in the hand and feeling in it, hearing you talk if you're slurring or your voice patterns or the things you say. No robot will be able to do that the way a human can do it because of the emotions involved in the human experience. So I've had electronics technology people ask me, Robert, what do you think? And I'll say, yeah, sure, you can do AI at the door. But the artificial intelligence tells you that this person has metal on their hip. What do you need now? Well, I guess we need a person. Yeah. And if it's a female, what do you need? I guess we need a female person. In the security world, there will be some technology changes, but the true security work will be done by people, humans.
Yeah, you know, Daryl Stevens, who I know you've heard of, was doing research with his son in Florida. One of the things they're looking at is robotic police. And they're testing systems where the robots are able to monitor behaviors on the street and identify potential crime. But we're getting close to where we have to conclude here. You brought up the whole idea of the women security, and I know when we were in New York, there was the panel, and I think it was the one of the clubs, Yes Club, where they hired all women security, and everybody said, how could you have all women security? You're never going to be able to control things. And I thought that was an interesting perspective because there is a difference. And I worked with a security director in Toronto, in Edmonton. She oversaw 15 venues in terms of their security. And she just brought a whole different approach to security than I've seen sometimes with male security.
It's crazy, Jim. It's absolutely crazy that this business model hasn't been sought out. And I know it's being sought out now. RHI is having more and more, delving into more and more women businesses, women operators. 15 years ago, I did my first survey at San Diego State. And this still stands. It still stands as of 2 years ago, pre-COVID. The number one reason drinking age women 21 to 25, and I did a survey of over 1,500 college age drinking women, the number one reason they go out to the bar they go to is they felt safe. Now, yes, there were answers like I knew the DJ, I knew the bartender, they had no cover charge, but the number one reason was they felt safe. And can you guess what the number one reason the same age men, college age men, 21 to 25, over 1,500, the number one reason men went out to bars and clubs, can you guess?
Women.
To find women. So imagine the simple business plan. Bring women on board, have them help you with your design, your layout, your color scheme, and your security to make it safer for women, to make it more inviting for women. Men will go. I have been to clubs run by women. I have been to clubs run by men. There is a vast difference in the simplicity of decorations, in the simplicity of color schemes. And those are all psychologically known and have been known for years to change the mindset of people. Women come into this with a totally different view based on, I'm sorry, but based on sexuality. And I'm not saying 100% of women, but a good percentage of them can see, we do handle things different. That's why, and I know this gets deep, but children can be just fine from a one-parent home. But I think they're more well-rounded, this is my personal opinion, with a two-parent home. And I mean two parents. I don't mean a male and female, but a two-parent home, because they can see several different things they wouldn't see from a single-parent home. And it's the same with the bar and club world. Women have an absolute role in it. And I've been pushing, I think it was, 15 years ago, the Wall Street Journal or Vice magazine or some magazine approached me, and it was tough to find 3 females that were doing frontline bouncer or security work. One was in Alaska, one was in New York, and one was in Miami, and I had worked with them. They're outnumbered, or they're so outnumbered by men, but they're so valuable to do the job, to do it correctly and safer.
All right, this has been very enlightening, and particularly you're reinforcing my goal for the summit in Dallas is to have a women track that would feature women from all different segments, from policing, from regulatory, from music venue operators. And if you could help me identify somebody from a security perspective, that would be great.
Absolutely.
But where do you see the whole security world going? We've got 2 minutes to kind of summarize where you see it. I know when we talk with folks in the UK, that they seem so far advanced in terms of their licensing procedures and their, inspectors of venues with security and everything else. But where do you see it going in the US?
So I can understand where at first glance you'd see, okay, they're licensing, they're labeling, they're training, they're mandating. That's an advancement. Is it truly an advancement if there really is no substance to the check and balance of that? California licenses, but there's no real inspection for the licenses. And so the bad actors and even good actors that will see the way to be bad, they'll find the cheapest and the most inexpensive way to be trained or licensed, and they're not inspected. So they got out of it for 20 bucks instead of 120 bucks. So my view is, number one, regulations will increase. Cities that are smart, states that are smart will start saying, hey, we need to put some sort of regulations on these people. Number one, training can reduce violence. Once they see there's money to be saved, cities, municipalities, training can reduce officer response, which means millions of dollars to the city, especially a city like Burlington, where they're so outnumbered from bars, clubs, people to police on the street. Number two, I really believe that not much else other than finding the right people is going to change for the next 5 to 8 years within the security industry. My meaning here is you'll still need door hosts. You'll still need people to exclude and include, ID checkers, people to walk people out. But what's changing in this whole aspect over the next 5 to 8 years is the insurance costs. There are cities and states now that bars and clubs cannot buy insurance that have a gun issue. They're writing permanent exclusions if you have a gun crime on your property. And what's a bar supposed to do? What's a restaurant in Miami supposed to do when they have their insurance policy, but they get a gun exclusion, meaning you have no coverage. If a gun comes out and it shoots the own person in their foot, you have no coverage on that incident. That's the big driving change in the next 5 to 10 years is insurance pushing for weapon technology training.
Robert, I could talk to you forever around all of this stuff, but unfortunately you have to go and I have to go, and we had our 20-minute spot, which is a high end of conversation. So
Get it.
It's been wonderful, and I'm going to stop the recording, but we can chat for a couple of minutes afterwards.
Sure.
But again, thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time, and you've done incredible work. You've provided a valuable service, and I'm sure have saved many lives in all of the things that you've done.
Thanks, Jim.